everybody. Daniel Bayer from Next Best Picture, and we are talking with the directors of Rumours, Guy Maddin, Evan Johnson, and Galen Johnson. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Oh,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Dan. Thanks.
Very excited to speak to you all. The Green Fog is one of my favorite films in recent memory, and was very much anticipating this film as well, Rumours, when it premiered at Cannes Film Festival earlier this year. I'm curious, what was the genesis of this film? How did you come up with the story for this?
Do you want to handle that one?
You want me to answer? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough. It's it happened slowly and naturally, so it's kind of tough to pinpoint the moment that it came to be. It's certainly true that it it showed up as a sort of a joke in another script we were working on. We were writing this really long script. It was taking a long time for us to write it, and every idea in the world was getting thrown into it. And somebody proposed the idea of just like a late second act twist, and then the G7 summit comes to town, and then we all sort of laughed at that idea as it's just a funny plot twist. And then we'd have a couple G7 scenes in this movie and then move on. But as we kept working away at the script, the G7 scenes kept getting longer and the other scenes started falling by the wayside. And eventually we just decided, look, let's just lose the rest. The G7 is something we had started over the years to become not obsessed with, but enamored of, certainly.
Yeah, delighted by it.
Yeah, and the news footage of the G7 has been increasing over the last 20 years. Like, it's much more a piece of just visual propaganda than it used to be. And we started to fall in love with the way the leaders were depicted in all this news footage.
Also, the G7, I think we liked because we have a tendency to sprawl and, have too many ideas. And the G7 suggested a limited cast, limited location, limited time frame. It provided constraints and was very self-contained, and these constraints I think really needed.
Yeah.
Okay, talk about that guy. This really need for constraint on the story. Is this something that
Other writers or filmmakers will talk about how constraints are liberating. There's that whole writing group, the Oulipo, where they're like a constraint. Georges Perec wrote a novel that without using the letter E, and it's a fat novel. These kind of constraints force you into strange contortions and directions and things. And we were writing in a void for a few years where anything was possible. We didn't know the budget we might have. We didn't know anything, and it was just too sprawling. So we decided to start putting our own constraints on, limiting ourselves to essentially 7 characters. We allowed Alicia Vikander and Zlatko Buric to enter later as 8th and 9th, but it just constraints. All of a sudden, you have a world with borders, and a style starts coalescing with a little more confidence, and suddenly you get some momentum and confidence going, and by the time we're actually writing the script, the 3 of us discussed the story, but Evan wrote the script, and he was in a flow state, and it just sort of came out in one piece practically. And thanks to the constraints, I guess, among other things to be grateful for.
Mhm. And because the G7 and all that stuff is obviously the spine of the movie, this meeting, and how it kind of all goes awry. But where did the boneless zombie-like monsters come from in the process?
Galen had pointed them out to me.
Well, I think I saw a YouTube video, 5 years ago of some archaeologists unearthing a bog person, and the floppiness, the wetness of it just struck me as so disgusting and so bizarre, because they pick it up and it's almost like it was made of Jello. It was really just disgusting, and it all sort of stuck with me.
And they really exist. These
Yeah.
Iron Age, carefully preserved to a point. Their bones are dissolved by the pH value of the bog water, but their fingerprints are preserved, their eyelashes and hair. The colors are changed, but they do exist. And it's believed that they were tribal leaders, ritualistically sacrificed, executed for failures to deliver crops or food or happiness within the tribe. So it kind of
It's a thematic sort of mirror.
Yeah, they lost an
seven leaders.
election, put it that way. Yeah,
I remember hearing was it some anthropologist or someone speculating that a good political system would be you elect your leader, and then after their term is up, you ritualistically slaughter them. And that's how the system should go. You know, you just presume
Yeah.
that your leaders commit all kinds of moral crimes
Let them do their thing.
while they're leaders, and then they are executed for their crimes, but that should be built into the system itself. I'm not saying it'll work, but just a suggestion.
It's worth a try.
Yeah, that is an understatement. Yeah, you know, I was particularly struck that at the start of the film, there's this note thanking the G7 leaders for their collaboration. So I'm curious, what did they actually do? How did they collaborate with you on
Well,
this
they didn't
project?
do much once we asked if we could premiere the film at their G7 summit this year in Italy.
Yeah,
They wouldn't return any of our emails or anything like that. But
Can you imagine?
so we settled for Cannes instead, and
yeah, their collaboration was, I suppose, kind of one way in that we watched videos of them.
And they don't know
they don't know that this movie exists. I don't think.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what was the conversation like trying to get their help with this plot?
I don't even know who you'd contact because the G7 doesn't really have they're an unofficial organization, and so that any given year it's the host country that handles all of the organization. So I guess you have to contact the host, but they don't have it's an informal.
it might be a
thing,
caterer. Actually,
Yeah.
just a caterer and someone who does fireworks and balloons.
So as far as that like goes, like there was not any, or like maybe perhaps you made the attempt, but you did not have the resources, I guess, to say like this is how, you know, these are the people that are let into the grounds, these are how these, you know, things are scheduled and set up, what little publicly available data is out there, and then just making up out of your own imaginations.
Yeah, I think that's mostly it. There's extensive video footage of them, so we base a lot of it just on what the types of you see their political aides are there, there are security there,
Some
press, and you can sort of get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
And then there's a good G7 history website that has some oral histories of G7 summits, and then you can find little snippets about G7 summits in the political memoirs of ex heads of state and finance ministers and stuff like that. So that's some of the deeper research, but mostly you do that. A lot of that research is so you can just ignore the research, like just you want to know, and then you would throw it all out and just write whatever you want, more or less.
Yeah.
But knowing that on some level what really goes on.
And it's a lot of fun to sort of explore and play around in this world that, you know, none of us will ever get to see. Absolutely. Yeah. And you assembled such an incredible cast for this movie, all 7, and then the additional 2. How did that casting process work? Did you have specific actors in mind for some of these roles, or did you just like throw a net out and see who was interested?
Eventually, we had specific actors in mind, but not immediately. We started with one role in particular. The role of the Canadian Prime Minister was written for Roy Dupuis, and we were really counting on him. And for a while, it seemed terrifyingly like he might not be available. And so we were pretty bummed out about that. But then he became available, so we were thrilled. And then I had just befriended Ari Aster, who knew Cate Blanchett a bit, and we approached her. And she came aboard, and pretty soon the casting just gained momentum, and the roles filled like falling dominoes. And by the time we were casting Alicia and Zlatko, who were the last 2 cast, it was just happened like nothing. It's great. And they were our first choices all along.
Yeah, Cate's a pretty big draw for other actors. So once you get crushed, it's just a bunch of yeses.
I know Charles Dance told me once, he pulled me aside and he said, "Thank you for this. I've always wanted to work with Cate, and this is a chance." And so it was really beautiful to hear him say that. And
did you think he was going to say, "I've always wanted to work with you"?
Well, I have to admit, it was a little disappointing the way he ended the sentence with me instead of me, but I'm used to it.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of actors. I know I would be dying to work with you. So there's
Oh,
that. And I'm glad actually that you brought up Charles Dance. The one of my favorite and oddest details in this film is that he speaks in his British accent, even though he is the American president.
Isn't he British though?
Or
Isn't he
So
British?
British.
Yeah, he's the most British person on the planet in the entire Commonwealth. Yeah.
yeah, very. And
But he's presidential. He is the most presidential actor we could think of for the role. So we just went with presidential, and no, it was baked into the script that the
yeah, I was going to ask. Yeah.
be British, and that he'd be from North Carolina,
But he's also a British man.
yeah, he's just British. So,
Yeah,
Charles
'cause
Dance just has the best voice and the best accent. I don't know why you would change it. It's like getting Fred Astaire to play a quadriplegic or something.
it would be a misuse.
Yeah, I like that analogy, but that was my question because it's a great line about where does your accent come from? Why do you have that accent? And then before he can answer, he's cut off. But I was
Yeah.
curious if that was originally supposed to be some random American accent, or was it always British in your mind?
It was always British.
Yeah.
Yeah, right from the get-go. And yeah, Charles has been a good sport about the annoying fact that he's asked about it in every interview he's done since. It's the first question he
Yeah, what's the matter? Can't you do an American accent?
But no, we made him do it, and he's been a great sport.
Yeah, but it did require, we realized that viewers might not be able to keep track who's the leader of what country and stuff. So we gave him on the page a big American flag bib to wear, a napkin for dinner and things like that were also right in there just to make sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of reminders in the script. He speaks often about how I'm the American president. As you know, I'm the American president. He says he has to mention it quite often so the viewers don't forget.
Great, hilarious detail. You have this cast of incredibly talented actors and also incredibly funny actors. And did you ever let them just riff with each other for a take or two, or did you ask them to stick as closely to the script as possible?
It was really close.
It was quite close. They would riff. There were some scenes where we weren't really shooting for dialogue. We were shooting B-roll, maybe of them walking along, and there's some very funny riffing in there that we just didn't include. I think didn't include it in the movie because it wasn't in the script, so we just didn't. But we have all kinds of.
The movie would have been too funny.
Yeah, we have. Pretty close, although. So it's funny that there's a distinction between improvised dialogue and just sticking close to the script, because even though they stuck so close to the script, there's a couple improvised lines. Acting is so much improvisation anyway. There's so much room
within a line.
Even within the line, that it just really doesn't feel like they're constrained by much. There
were vast differences between takes, even if they were saying exactly the same things. There's just a way of detailing through inflection and things like that. And another thing is we shot long shots of just people listening through a whole scene. Sometimes we just shot coverage of everybody. You'd learn that Rolando Ravello, the Italian, knew how to listen so fascinatingly, and that he would help detail the line of dialogue being performed by someone else. And same with Takahiro Hira, an incredible listener. I would start when Cate Blanchett was talking, I'd be watching Takahiro on his monitor, and he just holding a scene together with his ear somehow. It's kind of awesome.
I love that. Do you remember any particularly funny improvised bits that you ended up cutting?
No, but generally, well, I do remember a couple, but I'm not going to repeat them to protect the parties responsible. But Cate has a very lewd sense of humor. I'll say that her improvised material was the grossest and darkest, I think.
Yes, she goes there.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, moving on from the performances, the design and look of this film is so unlike anything else that I can think of in recent memory. You know, the cinematography is like it feels almost soft focus at times, and the colors feel so expressionistic. It almost looks like a dream. So how did you decide what you wanted the film to look like?
Well, I think at the beginning we wanted to have some sort of sense of grounding. Sorry. At the beginning we want to have some sort of grounding to not alienate viewers right away, but we like our color, and we wanted the color palette to resemble just like flags, so bright primary colors. And then once night falls, yeah, we get into a more like the gothic expressionism that we sort of all love, and has, you've probably seen a version of in our and Guy's previous movies. We just had, more expensive cameras and a bigger crew this time. But yeah, we just fog up that forest and put the diffusion filters on, and then in post just crank up the color, and that's the look of the movie.
Yeah, and Midsummer Night's Dream, the Max Reinhardt version from 36, I think it is 35, was a partial inspiration. It's sort of not locatable in the movie, but the spirit of it was there. And these sort of all-night dreamy adventures. Same with like American Graffiti and Dazed and Confused and things, just the spirit of the last night together, people getting closer for one last time.
Sure, I can see that. Absolutely.
And we like the challenge of taking, because we've never worked in real locations before, of taking real locations and making them look like sets. And so,
Yeah, I was going to ask if those forests, if you created them or if you found them.
We found them. Yeah.
Wow.
And by day on the location scouts, they just look like real forests. But once they're lit properly, and Stefan Chupek, our DOP, deserves credit for that. He actually did make, especially for the tryst. There's a tryst scene in the movie,
Yes,
where it looks like almost the cheapest of our sets, somehow. But it's it's like an the big set, and it's forest. It just looks a bit low.
Looks like
low
a soap opera.
Yeah, soap opera.
Giant log that Roy and Cate could sit on that made them look like little teenagers or something. It was that location was a great find.
it's incredible that that you found such great locations for this. Where did you shoot? How did you find these spots?
We were in the outskirts of Budapest,
Oh,
shooting in Budapest for, the movie's set in Germany, for various reasons. Hungary is cheaper and in some ways better to film. Great crews there. They shoot a lot of movies there.
Yeah. There was a Johnny Depp movie shooting in the next forest over at the same time.
Yeah. So, we just, in a 50-kilometer radius, 50-mile radius, or 33-mile, I don't know, I can't do the conversion, radius around Budapest. We just looked for forests that look good.
simple as that. I know we're coming up on near the end of our time together, but before we go, I had to ask about the giant brain because it's such a memorable visual in this film and such a large, when you write it that that's going to be one of the big things that people remember, I would assume. So how closely did you guys work with the production design team on making this thing, and how did you decide on the right colors, feels for that piece?
Came together. It was pretty easy for us. You have to make sure you check on these things because sometimes, I'd never worked with Zosha McKenzie before, the production designer, but she's great. But, miscommunication still happens. And I've had things delivered in the past that weren't the right size and things, but she just nailed it. And so she would just send in progress photos now and then, and we loved them. And so there were no unpleasant surprises. And once it was just sitting there on its little bed of moss in a forest thinking, it just looked exactly like we pictured it. And it was the color we pictured it. We know real human brains are monochromatic. They look the same in a black and white movie as they do in real life. But this is a movie brain, and it needed to be bigger and pinker and pinker. So it's pretty simple. We just have a rule. You know, it's almost, you can't have things be life-size. Certain things, doorways, windows, brains, have to be bigger or smaller on the screen.
That is a good piece of advice for anyone to take with them at the end
free
of
advice
this.
of the day. Yeah, free advice.
Absolutely. Guy, Evan, Galen, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and thank you
Thank
for your
you.
work on
That's
the
fun.
film.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.